The alien princess, Jyra, was a figure of power and mystery. Born into a royal lineage, she had always been the center of attention on her home planet, but she had never embraced the spotlight. Unlike other royalty who thrived on public admiration, Jyra had long preferred isolation. Her palace, a grand structure high in the mountains, was surrounded by silence, save for the occasional whisper of the wind or the sound of distant footsteps from her guards. Jyra was not an ordinary princess. She held powers that no one could fully understand, and her sharp intellect and distant nature only made her more enigmatic. For years, she had been the subject of rumors. Some believed she was a mystical being, others said she was cold-hearted and cruel, and a few even suggested she was cursed. But none of this mattered to Jyra. She had never sought validation from others. The truth was, she had her own reasons for staying away from the royal court and the eyes of her people. Her days were spent in reflection and study. Jyra would often sit by her grand windows, looking out over the vast alien landscapes, wondering about the universe beyond her planet. She had grown weary of the endless political games, the court intrigues, and the people who always wanted something from her. For her, these matters felt empty. She longed to understand the universe on her own terms. Yet even in her solitude, the weight of her title never left her. She was the future ruler of her planet, and the pressure to live up to her ancestors' legacy weighed heavily on her. Despite her feelings of isolation, Jyra had an unspoken curiosity about other civilizations. She had heard stories of the humans, a species so different from her own. They were young, bold, and filled with an insatiable drive to explore the stars. Unlike the alien aristocracies, where rules and traditions governed every action, humans were driven by a sense of curiosity and independence. Jyra found herself intrigued by them. There was something about their resilience and determination that captivated her, something that she could not find in the endless corridors of her palace. One day, she made a decision that would change everything. She would leave the confines of her home and explore the human world firsthand. Jyra knew it was a dangerous move. Her departure would be noticed, and the consequences of leaving her people behind were uncertain. But something inside her stirred, pushing her toward the unknown. The thought of human ambition, their thirst for adventure, and the mystery of their cultures seemed far more exciting than the sterile, predictable life she had been living. Jyra's departure was secretive. She boarded one of the human ships that had arrived at a nearby spaceport, disguised and hidden from view. The crew of the ship had no idea that the alien princess was among them. She was determined to explore their world without the weight of her royal title, to experience life as they did, and perhaps to find a new purpose beyond the throne. As the ship's engines roared to life and they lifted off from her home planet, Jyra felt a sense of freedom that she had never known before. The vastness of space stretched out before her, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was truly in control of her destiny. Her journey into the unknown had begun, and there was no turning back. The human ship, the Aurora, was a sleek vessel designed for exploration. It was a mix of advanced technology and simplicity, and its crew consisted of men and women from various parts of Earth, each chosen for their skills and courage. They had no idea that they were carrying something far more extraordinary than they could ever have imagined. Jyra sat quietly in the cargo hold, hidden away among the supplies. She had cloaked herself in a simple human uniform, hoping to blend in. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. This was her chance to observe humanity from up close, to understand what made them so different from her own people. She had spent countless hours studying them from afar, but now she would experience their world firsthand. She felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if she were on the verge of something important. Hours passed, and the ship moved deeper into space. The crew went about their usual duties, unaware of the alien princess among them. Jyra was careful not to draw attention to herself, sticking to the shadows and staying out of sight. She watched the crew as they worked, intrigued by their ease and efficiency. They moved with a sense of purpose, yet there was also a calmness about them. It was something Jaira had never seen in her own people, who were always burdened by the weight of their duties and responsibilities. But soon, Jaira's presence would be discovered. It happened when one of the crew members, a young man named Jake, wandered into the cargo hold to check on the supplies. He was a seasoned pilot, but still a bit of a rookie when it came to security. As he moved past the crates and containers, he noticed a figure standing at the back of the room. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized it was a woman, an alien woman. His heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. He wasn't sure if he should reach for his communicator or just run. He'd never encountered anything like this before. Jaira, startled, quickly raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you," she said in perfect English, her voice calm and measured. She had learned the language from the human transmission she had studied. Jake blinked in disbelief. He had heard rumors of aliens, of course, but never did he think he would come face to face with one. Especially not like this. What are you doing here?" he stammered. Jaira stepped forward, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and sincerity. "I came to learn about your people. I've watched you from afar, and now I wish to understand. I mean you no harm." Jake was speechless. He had so many questions, but all he could do was stand there, staring at the beautiful, mysterious woman before him. The way she spoke was gentle, yet there was an undeniable strength in her presence. Before he could respond, the ship's captain, Captain Nolan, appeared in the doorway. He had heard Jake's voice and quickly came to investigate. His eyes narrowed when he saw the alien princess standing there. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. "What's going on here, Jake?" Captain Nolan demanded, his voice steady but full of authority. Jake, still in shock, pointed to Jaira. I don't know, sir. She says she's here to learn about us. She's not here to harm anyone." Captain Nolan looked Jaira up and down, sizing her up. His gaze was both cautious and curious. "Is this true? Who are you, and why are you on my ship?" Jaira held his gaze, her posture confident yet humble. "I am Princess Jaira of my people. I have come to observe, to learn about humanity." The captain took a deep breath, processing the information. This was not something he had ever expected, a princess. On his ship, this could be the opportunity of a lifetime, or a potential disaster. "We'll talk more," Captain Nolan said, his voice firm. "But first, you need to come with me. We have a lot to discuss." As Jaira followed the captain down the narrow corridors of the Aurora, she felt both excited and uncertain. Her journey into the unknown had begun, and now it seemed there was no turning back. The crew was sure to be divided in their opinion of her, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. The Aurora was silent after Jaira's reveal. The crew, once full of chatter and activity, now moved cautiously, their eyes constantly on her. Every step she took seemed to draw attention, but Jaira didn't mind. She had expected this. It was a natural reaction. What surprised her, though, was how the captain, Captain Nolan, had remained calm in the face of the unexpected. Most humans would have panicked, but Nolan had not. As the days passed, Jaira began to feel the weight of the ship's crew's curiosity. They would stare at her when they thought she wasn't looking. They would whisper to one another, exchanging hushed words about her appearance, her origins, and what her intentions could be. But the captain had given her a place in the ship's quarters, where she could stay undisturbed for now. He had made it clear that her presence was not a danger. But still, they all had questions. One afternoon, Captain Nolan came to her quarters. He knocked lightly on the door before entering, his face serious. Jaira was sitting by the small window, gazing out at the endless stars. "I'd like to know why you came aboard my ship," Nolan said, his voice calm but firm. Jaira turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. She had known this conversation would come sooner or later. She had prepared for it, but that didn't make it any easier. She was about to reveal the truth about herself. The reason she had left her planet in the first place. The reason she had chosen a human ship. "I came because I wanted to understand you," she said slowly. "I've watched your people from afar for many years. I've heard of your ambitions, your dreams, your thirst for exploration. Unlike my people, you are not bound by tradition or fear. You take risks. You dream big, and I wanted to know what that felt like." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "So you came here to learn. But why us? Why not other alien species?" Jaira's eyes softened. "I've seen many species in the galaxy. Some are as ancient as my own. Others are younger. But all of them are limited by their own rules, their own ideas. But humans, you are different. You have something that others do not. Something I've never seen before." Captain Nolan leaned against the doorframe, intrigued but cautious. "What is it that we have that others don't?" Jaira stood up and walked toward him, her voice dropping to a quiet whisper. "You have hope. You have a belief that anything is possible, even if the odds are against you. My people, we've lost that. We've become prisoners of our own history. But you, humans, are free. I wanted to see that freedom for myself." There was a long pause as Nolan processed her words. Jaira wasn't just another alien trying to negotiate a trade deal or form an alliance. She was someone who truly wanted to understand humanity. It was a rare thing, a gift. "I see," Nolan said after a moment. "You want to see the world through our eyes, to understand us in a way that no one else has ever tried to. But that's dangerous. You're a princess. Your people must want you back." Jaira's gaze hardened slightly. "Yes, my people want me back. But I am not ready to return. Not yet. I need to see more of your world. I need to understand why you fight for what you believe in. I need to see what it means to truly be free." Nolan studied her for a moment. It was clear she wasn't lying. Her desire to learn was genuine. But he also knew that bringing someone like Jaira on board could be risky. She was royalty. Her disappearance would send ripples through the galaxy, and her enemies wouldn't hesitate to use that against her. But for some reason, Nolan felt he could trust her. "All right," he said finally. "You can stay. But you have to promise me something. You need to be honest with us. No more secrets." Jaira nodded, a small smile on her lips. "I promise." With that, the tension in the room seemed to ease. Jaira and Nolan both knew that this was just the beginning. She had more to learn, and perhaps more to give in return. But for now, the princess's secret was out, and with it, the hope of discovering something more than she had ever expected. Days passed, and the Aurora continued its journey through deep space. Jaira's presence was becoming more known to the crew, but the reactions were mixed. Some were fascinated by the alien princess, intrigued by her otherworldly beauty and calm demeanor. Others, however, remained cautious, even fearful. They didn't fully trust her, and the growing tension on the ship was palpable. Jaira had done her best to remain quiet and unobtrusive, but it was clear that her arrival had disrupted the balance of life on board. The crew's unease began to spread like a quiet storm, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Despite her peaceful intentions, she could feel the weight of their stares and hushed conversations. She wasn't entirely sure if they were more afraid of her power or her royalty. Either way, she was beginning to feel like an outsider. Captain Nolan had tried to ease the crew's concerns, reminding them that she was not an enemy. But the tension remained. It didn't help that the Aurora was heading toward a dangerous part of space, where hostile factions roamed. The crew had been briefed on the risks, but the presence of a princess, a figure of immense importance, was enough to raise concerns. Would she bring more danger than they were prepared for? Could they truly protect her if they encountered trouble? Jaira sensed the fear, and it unsettled her. Her purpose for being aboard the ship was to learn about humans, but she was beginning to question whether they would ever truly accept her. She longed for the kind of trust and openness she had read about in human history, but the walls between them were growing thicker with each passing day. One evening, while she sat alone in the ship's observation deck, gazing out at the endless stars, Captain Nolan approached her. His footsteps were soft, but she could feel his presence before he spoke. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Jaira turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure," she replied honestly. "I've been on this ship for days, yet I feel more alone than I've ever felt. The crew doesn't trust me, Captain. They don't see me for who I am, only as a symbol of something they don't understand." Nolan nodded slowly. He had suspected this was troubling her. "It's not easy, being the first of your kind to travel among us. But I think they're just afraid of the unknown." Jaira sighed, staring back out at the stars. "I understand their fear. I've seen it before in my own people. It's the fear of what is different, what cannot be controlled. But I wish they could see me as I am, not just as the alien princess or the outsider." Captain Nolan took a few steps closer. "It takes time. I'm sure the crew will come around once they see that you're not a threat. We're not used to seeing someone like you, but we got your back." Jaira looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I want to believe that," she said softly. "But what if they never do? What if I can't make them see me as a person?" Nolan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering reassurance. "Then we'll show them together. It's not about what they think. It's about the truth of who you are." Jaira smiled faintly, but her mind was still clouded with doubt. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. In her homeworld, she had been a princess, respected, even feared. But here, aboard the Aurora, she was just another face among many. It was a strange feeling, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. As the ship continued to sail through the stars, Jaira knew that her journey was far from over. The crew's trust would take time, and she had to earn it. But deep down, she also knew that this was her chance to change, to grow beyond the boundaries of her royal title and find her place among humans, if they would allow her to. The Aurora was drifting peacefully through the stars when the unexpected happened. The ship's sensors began to blink erratically, signaling the approach of an unknown enemy. The crew immediately sprang into action, their faces set with determination as they prepared for what could be a deadly encounter. Jaira, who had been in her quarters, felt the sudden change in the ship's atmosphere. She had never experienced anything like it before. Humans were acting with an intensity she had never seen. She sensed the fear that filled the ship, but also the readiness to fight back. Captain Nolan quickly gathered the crew in the command room, and Jaira was invited to join them. She was now part of the crew, and despite the tension that still lingered, there was a growing sense of camaraderie between them. Jaira could feel the shift, but she knew that a bigger test awaited them. "What's happening?" Jaira asked, stepping into the command room, her eyes scanning the screens displaying enemy ships closing in on them. "Pirates," Captain Nolan said grimly. "We've crossed into a dangerous sector of space. They've likely been watching us for days. They're trying to board the ship and take everything of value." Jaira's eyes widened as she saw the approaching ships. The pirates were well armed, their ships far more aggressive and dangerous than the Aurora was prepared for. It was clear this was no ordinary attack. The crew was outmatched. "You're going to fight them?" Jaira asked, her voice filled with concern. Captain Nolan's expression was resolute. "We have no choice. We'll defend ourselves until we can escape. The crew is ready." But as the enemy ships closed in, something unexpected happened. Jaira, who had been standing quietly by the wall, suddenly stepped forward. Her hand rose instinctively, and with a calm, focused motion, she reached out toward the enemy ships on the screen. The air around her seemed to shimmer with an unseen power, and for a moment, the crew stared in confusion. "What are you doing?" Nolan asked sharply, his voice filled with both concern and curiosity. Jaira didn't answer. She was focused, her eyes locked on the enemy ships. A low hum filled the room as her power surged through the air. Suddenly, the pirate ship's weapons began to malfunction. Their blasters sputtered and fizzled out, their engines stuttering as if they had lost all power. Captain Nolan and the crew watched in awe as Jaira's abilities took hold. She had intervened with the power of her mind, manipulating energy fields in a way that seemed almost impossible. The once threatening pirate ships were now at a standstill. Just a little more, Jaira whispered to herself, her focus unbroken. With a final surge of energy, the pirate ships were rendered completely inert, their weapons useless and their engines dead. The enemy was now helpless. The room fell silent. The crew, still stunned by what they had just witnessed, turned their gaze to Jaira. The princess, who had once been a mystery, had just saved them all. Her power was undeniable. She wasn't just a guest on the ship anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. Nolan was the first to speak. "You did that." Jaira nodded, her face expressionless. "I have the ability to manipulate energy fields. It's a power I've had since I was a child. I didn't want to use it until I had to." The captain took a deep breath, his mind racing with the implications. Jaira's abilities were far beyond anything they had imagined, and this moment had proven that. He looked at the crew, who were still trying to process what had just happened. No one had expected an alien princess to possess such power. "We'll need to talk about this," Nolan said, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of the situation. "But right now, we're safe. We can thank the princess for that." The crew nodded, but Jaira could feel the shift in their attitudes. There was no longer any doubt in their minds. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she had just proven her loyalty. But as the Aurora drifted once again into the calm of space, Jaira couldn't shake the feeling that her actions had set something in motion. The crew would respect her now, but there was still much to learn, and much to be feared. The princess had revealed a part of herself, and the universe would never see her the same way again. The Aurora drifted through the stars in the aftermath of the pirate attack. The crew was still shaken, but Jaira's actions had earned her their respect. She had saved them, no questions asked. But even with the immediate danger gone, there was still a lingering sense of unease. Jaira had revealed a power that no one on the ship had expected. She wasn't just a royal princess. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the crew wasn't sure how to process that. Captain Nolan had gathered the crew for a debriefing. The mood was more serious than usual, and everyone sat in quiet anticipation, waiting for what the captain would say next. "Jaira," Nolan began, his voice steady, "what you did back there was nothing short of extraordinary. We've never seen anything like it." Jaira stood in front of them, her posture straight, but her eyes betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I had no choice. You were all in danger." Nolan nodded, acknowledging her words. "We understand that. But there's still a lot we don't know about you, and about what you're capable of. Your power is something we haven't encountered before." The crew looked at Jaira with a mixture of awe and wariness. While her actions had saved them, it was clear they didn't fully understand the scope of her abilities, and that made them nervous. Human minds could only process so much at once, and dealing with a powerful alien princess was pushing their limits. "I didn't want to reveal my abilities," Jaira said quietly, "but I had to. I know it changes things. I know it makes me different in your eyes." The captain met her gaze, his expression softening. "We're not afraid of you, Jaira, but we need to know more. We can't move forward unless we trust each other." Jaira nodded, her heart heavy. Trust was something she had never been good at, least of all with others, and especially with herself. She had spent most of her life isolated, watching from a distance, never truly connecting with anyone. But something had changed aboard the Aurora. Despite the walls that remained, despite the lingering fear and suspicion, she had begun to trust them, each member of the crew. She wanted to believe that this human ship, this crew of strangers, could offer her something her own people could not, a sense of belonging. The silence stretched on for a moment before Nolan spoke again. "We're going to need to make some tough decisions. We've crossed into a region of space where there are factions that won't hesitate to come after us. Your enemies could be out there, and we can't afford to take any chances." Jaira's eyes darkened. She knew the risks. Her people had enemies, many enemies. Her departure would have raised questions, and soon, those questions would turn into actions. The fear of her being captured or forced to return was always in the back of her mind, but now, it was something more real. "We'll protect you, Jaira," Nolan said, breaking her thoughts. "But we need to know what we're up against. If we're going to stand a chance, we have to be united." Jaira felt a rush of gratitude toward the captain and the crew. It was the first time anyone had spoken to her as a partner, not as someone to be protected or feared. But even as her heart swelled with hope, doubt gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. Could she truly trust them? Would they stand by her when the storm hit? The tension was still there, but now it was different. The crew didn't look at her with suspicion as they once did. There was something more now, something tentative, but real. Trust, however fragile, had begun to form. As the Aurora continued its journey through the dark stretches of space, Jaira realized that she was no longer just a visitor among humans. She was part of something new, something uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, it felt like the right path. The Aurora sailed through the quiet stretches of space, and Jaira found herself in the ship's observation deck once again, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. The crew had settled into a new rhythm, and the initial tension had begun to fade. Yet, for Jaira, something felt incomplete. Her mind often wandered to her past, the life she had left behind on her home planet. It was a past filled with secrets, regret, and the heavy weight of her title. Captain Nolan had noticed the quiet change in her, the distant look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He had been patient with her, allowing her the space she needed. But it was clear that the princess was carrying something heavy inside. He had learned to read the small signs of unease, an unsteady breath, the slight tension in her shoulders. He knew that there was more to Jaira than the calm, composed princess she appeared to be. One evening after dinner, Nolan decided to approach her. The crew had settled down for the night, and the quiet hum of the ship filled the air. He found Jaira in the observation deck, standing as she always did, staring out at the stars. He stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. "Jaira," he said softly. She turned to face him, her expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "What is it, Captain?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of something else, something Nolan couldn't quite place. "I think it's time we talked," Nolan said, walking closer. "About your past, about why you've been running." Jaira's eyes flickered for a moment, a flash of emotion crossing her face before it disappeared, replaced by her usual calm demeanor. She didn't speak right away, but she didn't turn away from him either. Nolan knew it wasn't an easy thing to share, but it was something that needed to be said. "I haven't been running," Jaira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been hiding. Hiding from my past, from my duty, from my people." Nolan stepped closer, his expression softening. "I understand more than you think. We all have our reasons for leaving parts of ourselves behind. But if we're going to move forward, you have to trust us. We can't protect you if we don't understand what we're protecting you from." Jaira took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly. "I wasn't always distant and cold. But things changed when I became the heir to the throne." She paused, as if the weight of her words was too much to bear. Nolan remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "My people, my kingdom, became corrupt. Power became more important than people. The council was full of people who would do anything to stay in control, no matter the cost. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I despised the very system I was meant to lead." Jaira's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, but she kept her composure. Nolan took a step forward, offering her the space to speak without interruption. "I tried to change things. I tried to be different, but it wasn't enough. The council turned against me, called me weak, and branded me a traitor. I wasn't ready to be the ruler they wanted me to be. So I left. I ran, thinking I could escape the weight of their expectations. But no matter how far I go, the past follows me. Nolan watched her closely, seeing the pain in her eyes. You don't have to face it alone, Jaira. You don't have to carry it all on your own. We're here for you. Jaira's eyes met his, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. I'm not sure I know how to trust anyone anymore. I've been alone for so long. I don't know if I can let go of the past. Nolan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You don't have to let go of everything, Jaira, but you don't have to carry it all either. You've already made the hardest decision. To be who you are, not what they wanted you to be. That's more than most people ever manage. Jaira didn't respond, but the weight on her shoulders seemed a little lighter. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in. The past couldn't be erased, but the future, her future, was still waiting. And with the Aurora and its crew, she was starting to see that it might be possible to rebuild something new, something better. The calm that had settled over the Aurora was shattered when the ship's alarm suddenly blared through the halls, echoing off the walls. Jaira's heart skipped a beat as she quickly rose from her seat, her instincts kicking in. The crew had barely had time to recover from the pirate attack, and now they were facing another threat. All hands on deck. Captain Nolan's voice came through the loudspeakers, steady and commanding. Enemy ships approaching fast. Prepare for battle. Jaira's thoughts raced. She had already seen what the humans were capable of in terms of resilience and strategy. But she knew that the Aurora was outnumbered, and their chances of survival were slim if they couldn't hold their ground. As the crew scrambled into action, Jaira's eyes met Captain Nolan's, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. He trusted her now. He had seen what she could do, and he knew she was their best hope in the coming fight. We're going to need your help, Nolan said firmly as he approached her. You've proven you can protect this crew. It's time to do it again. Jaira nodded without hesitation. She had already made her choice, to stand with the humans, no matter the danger. As she followed Nolan to the command center, the reality of what was happening began to sink in. This time, there was no running. There was no hiding. It was all or nothing. The enemy ships loomed larger on the monitors, their designs sleek and menacing. The crew worked quickly, preparing the ship's defenses, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The enemy outnumbered them, and their weapons were far more advanced. Enemy ships are closing in, Captain, reported the communications officer. They'll be within range in 3 minutes. Nolan turned to Jaira, his eyes full of determination. We need to buy time. Can you do it again? Jaira took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she focused. Her powers were unlike anything the humans had seen before, and while they had saved them from the pirates, this new threat would require everything she had. She had been reluctant to use her abilities again, but there was no choice now. I can, she said, her voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. But it will take all of my energy. I can't keep it up for long. Nolan nodded, understanding the cost. Do what you have to do. As the enemy ships came into view on the monitors, Jaira closed her eyes, her mind focusing on the waves of energy that surrounded them. Her power surged through the ship's systems, and the lights flickered for a brief moment as she reached out to manipulate the energy fields around them. She could feel the power building inside her, and with a sharp exhale, she directed it outward. On the monitors, the enemy ships began to stutter. Their weapons misfired, their engines sputtered, and the attacking ships suddenly veered off course. Jaira's grip on the power tightened, and the enemy ships slowed, their movements becoming erratic as their systems faltered. But Jaira could feel the strain on her body. The energy she was manipulating was vast, and it was beginning to take its toll. Her vision blurred slightly, and she fought to keep her concentration. Jaira. Nolan's voice snapped her back to reality. They're trying to regroup. Can you hold them off a little longer? She nodded, gritting her teeth against the pressure. Just a little longer. I can't do much more after this. With every ounce of her strength, Jera focused her power, pushing the enemy ships further away, slowing them down, and buying the Aurora precious time. But she could feel the weight of it all. The strain was overwhelming, and her head throbbed with the effort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the enemy ships began to pull back, their systems completely offline. Jera collapsed to her knees, gasping for air, her strength completely drained. Captain Nolan rushed to her side, his expression a mix of concern and awe. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Jera managed a faint smile, but she was barely able to stay conscious. "We did it," she whispered. As the Aurora limped into safer space, the crew cheered. The immediate danger was over, and they had survived against all odds. But as Jera lay back, her body aching, she knew that the battle was far from over. There were more challenges ahead, and she, along with the crew of the Aurora, would face them together. The Aurora had survived the enemy attack, but the victory felt bittersweet. Jera sat alone in her quarters, still trying to recover from the strain of using her powers to protect the ship. Her head throbbed, and her body felt weak, as though every ounce of energy had been drained from her. But despite the exhaustion, her mind was sharp, reflecting on everything that had happened. The crew had praised her for her bravery, and Captain Nolan had made it clear that her actions had saved them all. But Jera couldn't shake the feeling that her powers, while useful, had created a new kind of tension. She had shown just how much she could do, but with that revelation came a price, one that she wasn't sure the crew was fully prepared to pay. The door to her quarters slid open, and Nolan entered, his face serious but not unkind. He had always been straightforward with her, and she had come to appreciate that honesty. "You're not alone," Nolan said, his voice gentle. "I wanted to check in on you." Jera looked up at him, trying to smile, but the exhaustion made her expression more somber. "I'm fine, Captain. Just a little tired." Nolan didn't seem convinced. He took a seat across from her, his gaze fixed on her tired face. "I know you've been through a lot. We all have, but we need to talk about what happens next." Jera nodded, understanding where he was going. The victory over the enemy had been a relief, but they all knew it was temporary. They had bought themselves some time, but it wouldn't be long before more threats emerged. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tiredness creeping into her tone. Nolan leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "We can't ignore the fact that your presence here has changed things. You've shown us a lot of what you can do, and that puts us in a difficult position." Jera looked down, her fingers curling slightly. She had feared this moment, the one where her power would no longer be a gift, but a source of division and distrust. "I understand," she said quietly. "My abilities, they make me dangerous. To you, to everyone. I know that." Nolan shook his head. "No. What makes us stronger is that we trust each other. But that's the key. Trust." Jera looked up at him, her heart racing. "What are you saying?" Nolan stood up and walked to the window, his eyes scanning the stars. "I'm saying that we've become more than just a crew with a mission. We're an alliance. You and me, the humans and the aliens. But that alliance will only work if we can be honest with each other and put our faith in each other. And right now, there are still too many unknowns between us. We've seen what you can do, Jera, but we need to know more. We need to know how far you're willing to go to protect us, and how far we're willing to go to protect you." Jera's heart pounded as she processed his words. She had never been part of an alliance before. Back on her home planet, alliances were often fragile, built on promises that were broken the moment power shifted. She had seen that firsthand. But with the crew of the Aurora, things were different. They had stood by her, trusted her, and now they were asking her to trust them in return. She stood up slowly, her knees still weak from the earlier battle. "I'm not used to trusting anyone, Captain. I'd spent so many years alone, running from my past. But I'm here now. I'm here with all of you. And I'll protect this crew with everything I have. I owe you that much." Nolan turned to face her, his expression softening. "Then let's make this work. Together. As an alliance." Jaira nodded, feeling something shift inside her. It was a small step, but it was the first one towards something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for a long time. Hope. The Aurora was no longer just a ship. It was her new home. And the crew was her new family. As Nolan left her quarters, Jaira looked out at the stars once more, her mind quiet for the first time in a long while. The road ahead would be difficult. There were still enemies lurking, and there would be more challenges to face. But for the first time, she felt ready. She wasn't alone anymore. And together, with the crew of the Aurora, she would face whatever came next. The Aurora drifted deeper into uncharted space, its engines humming softly as the crew went about their daily duties. Despite the calm exterior, there was an undercurrent of anticipation aboard the ship. The crew had faced many challenges, from pirate attacks to the unknown dangers of deep space, but now they had something more to worry about, something that united them in a way they hadn't expected. Jaira stood at the observation window once again, her eyes lost in the stars. She had changed since she first boarded the ship. The quiet, reserved princess who had hidden from the world was slowly being replaced by someone stronger, someone who felt like she belonged. The crew had accepted her, not because of her power or her royal title, but because of who she was, someone who wanted to learn, to connect, and to fight for what was right. Her thoughts were interrupted when Captain Nolan entered the room, his footsteps light but purposeful. He had been by her side since the beginning, and now he seemed to be the only person who truly understood the weight she carried. "I've been thinking," Nolan began, his voice low and thoughtful. "We've been through a lot, but I think we've reached a point where we need to decide what comes next. The universe is vast, and there's so much left to discover. But we're stronger as a team, Jaira. You've shown us that." Jaira turned to face him, her gaze steady but filled with the uncertainty that had lingered in her heart for so long. "I don't know if I'm ready for what's ahead, Captain. There's so much I still don't understand, so much I need to figure out." Nolan smiled, a reassuring, quiet smile that spoke volumes. "None of us are ever really ready, Jaira, but we move forward together. We learn together. We trust each other. That's what makes us stronger." For the first time, Jaira allowed herself to believe that. She wasn't alone anymore. She didn't have to carry the weight of the universe on her shoulders. The crew, despite their differences, had become her family. And that was something she had never had before. "I've spent so much time running from my past," Jaira said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "From my duty, from the expectations of my people. But with you, with all of you, I feel like I can finally stop running. I can start being who I'm meant to be, not who they wanted me to be." Nolan stepped closer, his voice sincere. "You're more than just a princess. You're part of this crew now. And we need you just as much as you need us." Jaira smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. The walls she had built around herself were slowly crumbling. She had always believed that her power and her title defined her, but now she realized that it was her choices, her actions, and her connections with others that truly shaped who she was. "What now?" Jaira asked, looking out at the stars once more. Nolan glanced at the star map on the wall. "We keep moving forward. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting for us. We don't know what we'll face, but we face it together." Jaira nodded, her heart light for the first time in years. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she no longer feared it. She wasn't just the princess of a distant world. She was part of something bigger, something meaningful. As the Aurora continued its voyage into the unknown, Jaira found a sense of peace she had never known before. She was no longer just hiding from her past. She was embracing her future, and she was doing it with the crew that had become her family. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibilities. And for the first time, Jaira knew that no matter what came next, she was ready.